The Starship Eos glided silently through the vast expanse of space, its sleek metallic surface reflecting the faint light of a distant sun. Inside, Captain Elias Venn stood at the helm, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic display in front of him. He was no stranger to danger or discovery. But this mission felt different. Humanity's exploration of uncharted planets had always been driven by curiosity, survival, and the need for resources. Yet, as the Eos approached Exathera 7, there was an air of mystery that even the most advanced technology couldn't unravel. Exathera 7 was unlike anything they had seen before. From orbit, it appeared as a vibrant jewel suspended in the void, its surface covered in lush green jungles, shimmering rivers, and towering mountain ranges. But what intrigued Elias the most wasn't just its beauty. It was the strange energy readings emanating from deep within the planet. Something unusual was happening down there, and he intended to find out what. As the ship descended into the atmosphere, the crew prepared for their first ground expedition. Dr. Lyra Chen, the team's xenobiologist, double-checked her equipment, while Lieutenant Rin Karis loaded supplies onto the transport shuttle. Everyone knew the risks involved in exploring an unknown world, but excitement buzzed through the air like static electricity. This could be the moment they discovered something truly extraordinary. The shuttle touched down on a wide clearing surrounded by dense jungle. Tall trees with iridescent leaves stretched high into the sky, their branches intertwined like nature's own cathedral. The air was thick with humidity and filled with the sounds of chirping insects and distant animal calls. It was both breathtaking and unnerving, a reminder that they were stepping into the unknown. "All right, everyone," Elias said, his voice steady but firm. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with here. Stick together, gather samples, and report anything unusual." The team fanned out, each member focused on their assigned task. Dr. Chen carefully collected plant specimens, marveling at how some emitted soft glows when touched. Lieutenant Karis scanned the area with a handheld device, mapping the terrain and searching for signs of intelligent life. Meanwhile, Elias took point, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his plasma pistol, not because he expected trouble, but because caution was second nature to him. It didn't take long for things to get interesting. About an hour into their exploration, one of the crew members spotted movement in the underbrush. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a shadow flitting between the trees. But then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, light, quick, and deliberate. Elias signaled for the team to stop and raised his weapon, though not aiming directly at anything yet. That's when she appeared. She moved like lightning, darting from tree to tree with such speed that it was hard to track her movements. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Her hair flowed behind her like liquid silver, and her violet eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and wariness. She wore no clothing, but her body seemed adapted to the environment, blending seamlessly with the jungle around. For a brief moment, she locked eyes with Elias, and time seemed to freeze. There was intelligence in those eyes, more than anyone had anticipated. She wasn't just an animal. She was sentient, aware, and very much alive. "Don't move," Elias whispered urgently to his team, lowering his weapon slightly. "Let's try to communicate." Dr. Chen stepped forward cautiously, holding up a small translator device designed to interpret alien languages. "Hello," she said slowly, activating the device. "We mean you no harm." The girl reacted instantly, but not in the way they hoped. With a snarl, she leaped forward, knocking the translator from Chen's hands and smashing it against a nearby rock. Before anyone could react, she disappeared back into the jungle, leaving only silence in her wake. "Well," Karis muttered dryly, breaking the tension. "That went well." Elias frowned, studying the spot where she had vanished. "She's fast. And smart. Did you see how she destroyed the translator? That wasn't random. It was calculated." "She's hostile," Karis added, gripping his rifle tightly. Maybe we should consider this place off limits until we figure out what we're dealing with. No, Elias replied firmly. There's more to her than aggression. Did you notice how she watched us? She's curious, maybe even scared. We can't write her off as a threat without trying to understand her. Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. I think you're right, Captain. She's clearly intelligent, possibly part of a species that's evolved to live independently of modern civilization. If we approach her carefully, we might earn her trust. Elias mulled over their words, gazing into the dense foliage where the mysterious girl had vanished. Whatever, or whoever, she was, she represented something remarkable. A being untouched by human influence, thriving in harmony with her environment. Understanding her could unlock secrets about Sci-Fi 7, and perhaps about humanity itself. All right, Elias said finally, turning back to his team. We'll set up camp here for now. Let's give her some space, but keep an eye out. I want to leave offerings, food, tools, anything non-threatening. Show her we're not here to hurt her. As night fell over the jungle, the crew worked quietly, their minds buzzing with questions. Who was this girl? Where did she come from? And why did she seem so wary of them? For now, answers remained elusive, hidden somewhere deep within the tangled heart of Sci-Fi 7. The jungle of Sci-Fi 7 was alive with sound as the first rays of dawn pierced through the dense canopy. Birds with iridescent feathers chirped melodiously, while strange insect-like creatures buzzed lazily in the humid air. The crew of the EOs had spent a restless night keeping watch, their minds replaying the fleeting encounter with the mysterious alien girl. She had vanished as quickly as she had appeared, leaving behind more questions than answers. Captain Elias Venn stood near the edge of their makeshift camp, staring into the thick green wall of foliage that surrounded them. His mind raced with possibilities. Was she still out there, watching? Did she see them as a threat, or something else entirely? He couldn't shake the image of her violet eyes, glowing with intelligence and defiance. There was something about her that intrigued him beyond logic, a pull he couldn't ignore. We need to try again, Elias said firmly, turning to face his team. She's not going to come to us willingly, but we can show her we're not here to harm her. Dr. Lyra Chen nodded, adjusting the strap of her satchel filled with scientific tools. I agree. If she's intelligent, and I believe she is, then patience is key. We'll start by leaving offerings. Food, water, anything that might interest her. Lieutenant Rincaris crossed his arms, skepticism etched across his face. And what if this is all for nothing? What if she just destroys everything we leave behind again? It's a risk we have to take, Elias replied without hesitation. We came here to explore, to learn. That includes understanding beings like her. If we rush or act aggressively, we'll lose any chance of making contact. With that, the team got to work. They gathered supplies from the shuttle and arranged them neatly on a large flat rock near the edge of the clearing. Fruits, nutrient bars, small tools, and even a shiny metal mirror were placed carefully, each item chosen to appeal to curiosity rather than provoke fear. As they stepped back, Elias couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and uncertainty. Would she return, or would their efforts be wasted? For 3 days, the offerings remained untouched. The jungle seemed indifferent to their presence, swallowing the silence with its constant symphony of life. Tension among the crew began to rise. Some whispered about abandoning the mission altogether, arguing that chasing after a single wild alien wasn't worth the risk. Others, like Dr. Chen, insisted on staying longer, convinced that patience would eventually pay off. Then, on the 4th night, something changed. Elias was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames when he noticed a flicker of movement in the shadows. At first, he thought it was just the wind rustling the leaves, but then he saw it, a pale figure darting between the trees, barely visible in the dim light. It was her. She's here, Elias whispered, motioning for the others to stay still. The girl moved cautiously, her glowing eyes fixed on the pile of gifts. She paused several times, sniffing the air and tilting her head as though weighing her options. Finally, she crept closer, her movements fluid and silent like a predator stalking its prey. Reaching the rock, she hesitated for a moment before snatching up a piece of fruit and disappearing back into the jungle faster than anyone could react. "Well, that's progress," Karis muttered dryly, lowering his weapon. "At least we know she's interested in food." "Exactly," Dr. Chen said, her voice tinged with excitement. "This proves she's observing us. She knows we're leaving these things intentionally, and now she's testing whether it's safe to approach." Over the next few nights, the pattern repeated itself. Each evening, the crew would replenish the offerings, and each morning, they'd find evidence that the girl had returned. Half-eaten fruits, scattered tools, or claw marks carved into nearby trees. But she never lingered long enough for them to get a clear look, always retreating deeper into the jungle before sunrise. One night, however, something unusual happened. Instead of taking the food and leaving immediately, the girl lingered near the edge of the clearing, crouching low in the shadows. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the darkness as she watched the humans go about their routine. When one of the crew members dropped a metallic cup, creating a loud clang, she didn't bolt. Instead, she tilted her head curiously, studying the object with keen interest. Encouraged by her reaction, Elias decided to take a calculated risk. Slowly, he picked up another shiny object, a small handheld device, and held it out toward her. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "We're not here to hurt you." For a moment, she froze, her muscles tensed as though ready to flee. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she took a hesitant step forward. Another followed, until she was close enough to snatch the device from his hand. Before anyone could react, she turned and disappeared into the jungle once more. But this time, she left something behind. On the ground where she had stood lay a single feather-like object, shimmering faintly in the moonlight. It was unlike anything the crew had seen before, delicate yet otherworldly, with patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on how the light hit it. "What do you think it means?" Dr. Chen asked, examining the object carefully. "I think it's a message," Elias replied thoughtfully. "A sign that she's willing to communicate, if only we can figure out how." As the days passed, the encounters grew bolder. The girl began leaving behind more clues. Symbols drawn in the dirt, broken branches arranged in peculiar patterns, and soft whispers carried on the wind that no translation device could decipher. It was as though she was trying to teach them something, using methods far removed from human language. But not everyone shared Elias's optimism. Lieutenant Karis remained wary, arguing that her behavior was unpredictable and potentially dangerous. "She's playing games with us," he said during one heated discussion. "What happens when she decides we're not worth the effort anymore? Or worse, when she turns on us?" "She hasn't given us any reason to distrust her," Elias countered. "Every interaction has been cautious, not hostile. Yes, she's testing us, but isn't that exactly what we're doing to her?" Despite the disagreements, the crew pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and determination. They continued leaving offerings, experimenting with different items to see which ones caught her attention. Music proved particularly effective. One evening, when they played a soft melody on a portable speaker, she emerged from the jungle and stood just within sight, swaying slightly to the rhythm. It was a small victory, but it meant everything. For the first time, they weren't merely observers, they were connecting. Slowly but surely, the barriers between them were beginning to crumble. Yet, even as trust started to form, danger loomed on the horizon. Strange seismic tremors began shaking the ground, rattling the trees, and sending flocks of birds fleeing into the sky. The jungle, once serene and inviting, now felt restless, as though bracing for something ominous. "What's causing this?" Dr. Chen wondered aloud, checking her instruments for answers. "I don't know," Elias admitted, his brow furrowed with concern. "But whatever it is, it's coming from deep within the jungle. and I have a feeling our wild friend knows more than she's letting on. The jungle of HFY 7 was no stranger to storms, but the one that rolled in during the early hours of the morning felt different. It wasn't just rain pelting the leaves or wind howling through the trees. It was as if the planet itself had awakened, restless and angry. Lightning split the sky in jagged streaks, illuminating the dense canopy with flashes of electric blue. Thunder rumbled so loudly it shook the ground beneath their feet. Captain Elias Venn stood at the edge of the camp, staring into the chaos. The crew had taken shelter inside their tents and the transport shuttle, but sleep was impossible. The storm seemed unnatural, almost sentient, as though it were warning them to leave. Yet, despite the danger, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there, caught in the fury of the tempest. Then he saw her. Through the sheets of rain, a pale figure stumbled into the clearing. It was the girl, her silver hair plastered to her face, and her body trembling from exhaustion. She clutched her side, where a dark stain suggested an injury. For a moment, she hesitated, her violet eyes darting between the humans and the safety of the jungle behind her. But the storm gave her little choice. She collapsed onto the muddy ground, too weak to move further. "Elias," Dr. Lyra Chen called out, rushing toward him with a medical kit in hand. "Is that?" "Yes," Elias replied, already moving toward the girl. "Help me get her inside." Lieutenant Rin Karis appeared beside them, his expression tense. "Are you sure about this? What if she's dangerous?" "She's hurt," Elias said firmly. "We're not leaving her out here to die." With Chen's assistance, they carefully carried the girl into the shuttle, laying her on a cot in the cramped medical bay. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin felt unnaturally cold to the touch. Chen immediately set to work, cleaning the wound on her side and applying a synthetic bandage designed to accelerate healing. As the doctor worked, the girl's eyes fluttered open. For a brief moment, panic flashed across her face, and she tried to sit up, only to wince in pain. Elias placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, holding her down. "It's all right," he said softly. "We're trying to help you." She stared at him, her glowing violet eyes filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. Slowly, she relaxed, allowing Chen to continue treating her. Though she didn't speak, her gaze never left Elias's face, as though searching for answers or reassurance. Over the next few days, the girl remained in the shuttle, recovering under Chen's care. At first, she was wary, flinching at every sound and movement. But as time passed, she began to observe the humans more closely, watching their actions with keen interest. When Chen offered her food, she accepted cautiously, mimicking the way the doctor used utensils to eat. When Karis demonstrated how to use a tablet device, she reached out tentatively, pressing buttons and observing the results. "She's learning," Chen remarked one evening, sitting beside Elias as they watched the girl experiment with a small holographic projector. "Faster than I ever imagined possible." "It's incredible," Elias agreed, his tone thoughtful. "But why now? Why is she letting us help her after avoiding us for so long?" Chen shrugged. "Maybe she realized we're not a threat. Or maybe," she trailed off, glancing at the girl, "maybe she's lonely." The idea lingered in Elias's mind. If what they suspected was true, if she had been alone on this planet for years, then her behavior made sense. Her wildness wasn't born of malice but survival. And now, perhaps, she saw an opportunity to connect with others, even if they weren't like her. One afternoon, while the rest of the crew worked outside, Elias decided to try something new. He sat cross-legged on the floor near the girl, holding out a small object, a smooth stone he'd found earlier that day. "Here," he said gently, placing it in her hand. "This is for you." The girl examined the stone curiously, turning it over in her fingers. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled, a faint, fleeting expression that transformed her entire demeanor. Reaching into a pouch tied around her waist, She pulled out a feather-like object similar to the one she had left behind weeks earlier. She handed it to Elias, her movements deliberate and careful. "It's beautiful," Elias said, studying the shimmering artifact. "Thank you." From that moment on, their interactions became less guarded. The girl started mimicking more complex behaviors, such as drawing symbols in the dirt or using gestures to communicate basic needs. She even attempted to replicate human speech, though her vocal cords struggled to produce the correct sounds. Still, her determination was undeniable. Dr. Chen theorized that the girl's species might possess a unique form of intelligence, one rooted in observation and adaptation rather than traditional language. "She's not just learning from us," Chen explained during a team meeting. "She's teaching us too. Every gesture, every symbol, it's all part of her way of communicating." Elias nodded, recalling the intricate patterns she had drawn in the jungle. "If we can decode those symbols, we might be able to understand her fully." Despite the progress, tensions within the crew remained high. The strange tremors that had preceded the storm continued, growing stronger each day. Trees swayed violently, and fissures began appearing in the ground, forcing the team to relocate their camp multiple times. Whatever force was causing the disturbances showed no signs of stopping, and it worried Elias deeply. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the girl suddenly stood up and walked to the edge of the clearing. She pointed toward the jungle, her expression urgent. When Elias approached her, she grabbed his arm and tugged gently, motioning for him to follow. "What is it?" Elias asked, glancing back at the others. "What are you trying to show us?" The girl didn't respond verbally, but her intent was clear. Something important lay beyond the trees, and she wanted them to see it. "Do we trust her?" Karis asked skeptically, his hand resting on his weapon. "We don't have much choice," Elias replied. "If these tremors are connected to whatever destroyed her people, then we need to know what's out there." With the girl leading the way, the team ventured deeper into the jungle than ever before. The air grew heavier, thick with humidity and the scent of earth. Strange noises echoed around them, low rumbles and distant crashes that sent shivers down their spines. Yet a girl moved confidently, navigating the terrain with ease. Finally, they reached a clearing unlike anything they had seen before. In the center stood a massive structure, half buried in vines and moss. Its surface was covered in carvings that glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the tremors shaking the ground. This is incredible," Chen whispered, her voice filled with awe. "These ruins, they must be thousands of years old." The girl stepped forward, running her fingers along the carvings. Then, without warning, she turned to Elias and pressed her palm against one of the symbols. A low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated violently. "What did you do?" Karis demanded, gripping his weapon tightly. "I don't think she meant to harm us," Elias said quickly, stepping closer to the structure. "Look, the symbols are lighting up. She's activating something." As the glow intensified, images began to project into the air, holograms depicting scenes of a thriving civilization. There were towering cities, advanced technology, and beings that resembled the girl standing beside them. But then the images shifted, showing destruction and chaos. Massive machines descended from the sky, attacking indiscriminately until the once vibrant world was reduced to rubble. When the projection ended, the girl lowered her hand, her expression somber. She turned to Elias, her violet eyes filled with sadness and resolve. "She's showing us her history," Chen said quietly. "Her people, they were wiped out by those machines." Elias nodded, his heart heavy with understanding. "And now, whatever caused that destruction is waking up again." The girl took a step forward, pointing toward the ruins. This time, her message was clear. They needed to find a way to stop it. For the first time since arriving on HFY 7, the crew felt united, not just as explorers, but as allies. Together, they would face whatever dangers lay ahead, guided by the courage of a girl who refused to let her world fall into ruin again. The ruins stood as a silent testament to a forgotten era, their ancient carvings glowing faintly under the dim light of Sci-Fi 7's twin moons. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant rumble of tremors. Captain Elias Venn and his team stood at the edge of the clearing, staring in awe at the massive structure before them. It wasn't just a relic of history. It was alive, pulsing with energy that seemed to resonate deep within their bones. "What do you think it is?" Dr. Lyra Chen whispered, her voice trembling with both excitement and unease. She adjusted the settings on her scanner, trying to make sense of the readings emanating from the ruins. "It's not just architecture. There's something sentient about it." Lieutenant Rin Karist tightened his grip on his weapon, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. "If this thing caused the destruction we saw in those holograms, then we're walking into a trap. We need to be ready for anything." Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the glowing symbols carved into the stone surface. Each mark seemed to tell a story, a language written in light and shadow. He turned to the girl, who stood beside him, her violet eyes reflecting the soft glow of the ruins. "Do you know what this place is?" he asked gently, though he knew she wouldn't answer verbally. She tilted her head slightly, then reached out and pressed her hand against one of the symbols. Instantly, the ground beneath their feet vibrated, and a low hum filled the air. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a dark passageway leading deeper into the structure. "She wants us to follow," Elias said, interpreting her actions. "Whatever answers we're looking for, they're inside." The passageway was narrow and damp, its walls lined with more glowing carvings that illuminated their path. The girl moved confidently ahead, her steps steady despite the uneven terrain. Behind her, the crew followed cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Every sound echoed ominously: dripping water, the creak of shifting stone, and the faint hum of machinery buried deep within the structure. As they ventured further, the carvings began to change. What had once depicted scenes of prosperity and innovation now showed images of despair and ruin. Entire cities were reduced to ash, skies darkened by smoke, and beings fleeing in terror. At the center of every depiction was a towering machine, a hulking colossus with glowing red eyes and claw-like appendages. "These machines, they destroyed everything," Chen murmured, her voice heavy with sorrow. "But why? What could have possibly driven them to annihilate an entire civilization?" Elias didn't respond immediately. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it war? A malfunction? Or something far more sinister? Whatever the cause, it was clear that the machines were still active, and the tremors growing stronger outside suggested they were waking up again. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber at the heart of the ruins. The space was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a colossal sphere suspended above a pedestal, surrounded by smaller drones that hovered silently, their red lights flickering intermittently. The air crackled with energy, and the hum grew louder, almost deafening. "This must be the core," Elias said, stepping closer. "It controls the machines, if we can shut it down." Before he could finish, the girl grabbed his arm and pulled him back sharply. One of the drones had activated, its mechanical limbs unfolding as it turned toward them. Its red eyes locked onto the intruders, and a high-pitched whine filled the room. "Get behind me," Karras shouted, raising his weapon. But before he could fire, the girl darted forward, moving faster than anyone thought possible. With a swift motion, she knocked the drone off balance, sending it crashing into the wall. Sparks flew as it short-circuited, its red light fading into darkness. "How did she do that?" Chen exclaimed, stunned by the girl's speed and precision. "She's been fighting these things her whole life," Elias replied, his voice filled with admiration. "She knows how to take them down." More drones began to activate, their movements jerky but deliberate. The crew scrambled to defend themselves, firing plasma bolts and using tools to disable the machines. The girl fought alongside them, her agility unmatched as she dodged attacks and struck with lethal accuracy. Together, they managed to destroy several drones, but the core remained untouched, its glow intensifying with each passing moment. "We can't keep this up forever," Karis yelled over the chaos. "We need a plan." Elias scanned the chamber, his eyes landing on the pedestal beneath the core. "There," he shouted, pointing to a series of glowing panels surrounding the base. "Those must control the core. If we can access them, I'll cover you," Karis said, taking aim at another approaching drone. "Go." With the girl at his side, Elias sprinted toward the pedestal, dodging debris and blasts of energy. As they reached the base, the girl placed her hands on one of the panels, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into the surface. The core reacted instantly, its glow dimming slightly as if responding to her touch. "She's interfacing with it," Chen observed, joining them after disabling another drone. "Her species must have designed this system, or at least understood it." Elias nodded, watching as the girl worked. Her brow furrowed in concentration, and her body tensed as though she were physically battling the core's defenses. Slowly but surely, the vibrations in the ground began to subside, and the red lights on the remaining drones flickered and died. "It's working," Elias said, relief washing over him. "Keep going." But just as victory seemed within reach, the core emitted a blinding flash of light. The girl stumbled back, clutching her head as if in pain. The drones reactivated, their movements faster and more aggressive than before. "No," Elias shouted, rushing to her side. "Are you all right?" She shook her head, her violet eyes filled with urgency. She pointed to the pedestal, then to herself, signaling that she needed to finish what she had started, but alone. "You can't do this by yourself," Elias protested. "Let us help you." She hesitated for a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. It was a gesture of gratitude and trust. Turning back to the pedestal, she stepped forward, her entire body glowing faintly as she channeled all her strength into the final effort. The core roared to life, its energy surging wildly. The ground shook violently, threatening to collapse the chamber. The crew shielded themselves as best they could, their eyes fixed on the girl. With one last burst of determination, she slammed her hands onto the pedestal, releasing a wave of energy that engulfed the room. When the light faded, the core was silent. The drones lay motionless, their red eyes extinguished. The tremors ceased, and an unnatural calm settled over the jungle. Exhausted but victorious, the girl sank to her knees, her breathing labored. Elias knelt beside her, offering support as she struggled to stand. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved your world. And ours." She looked at him, her violet eyes shining with a mix of pride and sadness. Though she couldn't speak, her message was clear. The battle was over, but the scars would remain. As they made their way back to the surface, the jungle felt different, lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. The ruins no longer pulsed with malevolent energy. Instead, they radiated a gentle warmth, a reminder of the civilization that once thrived there. The jungle of Sci-Fi 7 seemed to breathe a sigh of relief after the destruction of the core. The tremors that had shaken the planet for days were gone, replaced by an eerie stillness that felt almost unnatural. Birds returned to their perches, and the air smelled fresher, as though the oppressive weight of the ancient machines had finally lifted. Yet, despite the newfound calm, tension lingered among the crew of the Eos. They had survived the battle within the ruins, but the cost weighed heavily on all of them, especially the girl. She sat quietly near the edge of the clearing, her silver hair catching the light of the setting sun. Her body was slumped forward, her hands resting limply in her lap. Though she had saved them all, the effort had clearly taken its toll. Her movements were slower now, her violet eyes dull with exhaustion. She didn't speak, or rather, couldn't, but her silence spoke volumes. It was as if she carried the weight of her entire world on her shoulders, and no amount of gratitude from the humans could ease that burden. Captain Elias Venn approached her cautiously, kneeling beside her. "You did something incredible," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "We wouldn't have made it without you." She glanced at him briefly, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold, but there was warmth in the gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. For a moment, Elias felt a surge of hope. Despite everything, she trusted him. And that trust meant more than words could convey. But not everyone shared his optimism. Lieutenant Rin Karras stood nearby, arms crossed, his face etched with skepticism. "I don't care how much she helped us," he muttered under his breath. "She's still unpredictable. What happens when this planet throws another curveball? Are we supposed to rely on her every time?" Dr. Lyra Chen turned to him sharply. "She risked her life to stop those machines. Rin, if anything, she's proven herself to be more reliable than any of us." "That's not the point," Karras shot back, lowering his voice slightly so only Chen could hear. "We're here to explore, not babysit some alien who might turn on us whenever she feels like it." Chen sighed, shaking her head. "You're missing the bigger picture. This isn't just about survival, it's about understanding." "Syra." She paused, realizing she had given the girl a name for the first time. "Syra has shown us that cooperation is possible, even between species as different as ours. That's worth fighting for." Karras opened his mouth to argue, but before he could respond, Elias interrupted. "Enough," he said firmly, standing up. "We've been through too much to let doubt divide us now. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." As night fell, the team gathered around the campfire, discussing their next steps. The core was neutralized, but questions remained. What had caused the machines to awaken in the first place? Was the threat truly over, or was it merely dormant? And most importantly, what role did Syra play in all of this? "She mentioned something earlier," Chen said thoughtfully, referring to the symbols Syra had drawn in the dirt during one of their earlier encounters. "Before we entered the ruins, she kept pointing to certain carvings, ones depicting energy waves radiating outward. I think she was trying to warn us that the machines weren't just localized threats. They were designed to expand." "Expand?" Elias asked, frowning. "You mean invade other planets?" "It's possible," Chen replied. "If the core hadn't been shut down, the drones might have spread beyond Sci-Fi 7. Who knows how many worlds would have been affected?" The implications were staggering. Humanity had come to this planet seeking knowledge and resources, but instead they had uncovered a potential disaster waiting to happen. Without Syra's intervention, the consequences could have been catastrophic. And yet, none of this explains why the machines attacked her people in the first place. Elias mused aloud. If they were created to protect, then why turn against their creators? Chen hesitated, glancing towards Syra, who sat apart from the group, gazing into the fire. Maybe they weren't meant to attack at all. Maybe it was a malfunction, a glitch in their programming. Or worse, sabotage. Elias nodded slowly, considering the possibility. Either way, it's clear that Syra holds the key to understanding what happened. If we can gain her full trust, maybe she'll share more. Over the next few days, the crew worked tirelessly to repair their equipment and prepare for departure. Supplies were running low, and the storms that had plagued the planet earlier showed signs of returning. But leaving wasn't as simple as boarding the shuttle and taking off. Syra had become an integral part of their mission, not just as a guide, but as a symbol of the connection they had forged with Sci-Fi 7. One evening, as Elias sat beside her, he noticed something unusual. Syra was drawing again, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. This time, however, the symbols were accompanied by small objects, stones, leaves, and fragments of metal that she arranged carefully around the markings. "What are you doing?" Elias asked gently, leaning closer. Syra looked up at him, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. She pointed to the symbols, then to the horizon, where the ruins lay hidden beneath the jungle canopy. It was an invitation, or perhaps a plea. "You want to show us something," Elias guessed, his tone hopeful. "Something important." She nodded, picking up one of the stones and pressing it into his palm. It was smooth and cool to the touch, etched with the same intricate designs found in the ruins. It was a token, a sign of goodwill, or maybe a test. "All right," Elias said, standing up. "Let's go." The journey back to the ruins was arduous, the path littered with fallen trees and treacherous terrain. But Saira led the way with unwavering determination, her movements fluid and precise. When they finally reached the chamber housing the deactivated core, she stopped abruptly, staring at the pedestal with a mixture of reverence and sorrow. "This place means something to her," Chen whispered, watching as Saira knelt beside the base. "More than just history." Saira placed her hands on the surface of the pedestal, closing her eyes as if listening to something only she could hear. Then, with deliberate movements, she began rearranging the glowing panels embedded in the structure. One by one, the carvings lit up, projecting images into the air, scenes of her people living in harmony with the machines, tending to crops, building cities, and exploring the stars. They weren't enemies, Elias realized, his voice filled with awe. They were partners. Chen nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Until something went wrong. Something destroyed that balance. As the projections faded, Saira turned to Elias, her expression resolute. She gestured toward the core, then mimicked pulling something away. An act of severance. It was clear what she wanted. The machines needed to be dismantled completely, ensuring they could never threaten anyone again. "It's risky," Karis warned, eyeing the core warily. "What if deactivating it triggers another reaction?" "We don't have a choice," Elias replied firmly. "If there's even a chance these machines could reactivate, we can't leave them intact. We owe it to Saira and to ourselves to finish this." With Saira guiding them, the team worked together to dismantle the core piece by piece. Each fragment was carefully removed and stored in reinforced containers, rendering the machines inert. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over the jungle, casting golden light over the ruins. Saira stood silently, watching as the last remnants of the core were sealed away. There was sadness in her eyes, but also relief, as though a great weight had been lifted. Turning to Elias, she placed a hand over her heart, then extended it toward him. It was a gesture of gratitude, a friendship, and a farewell. "We'll come back for you," Elias promised, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "When we can, we'll return." Saira smiled faintly, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared into the jungle, leaving behind only the sound of rustling leaves and the faint glow of bioluminescent flowers. As the crew boarded the shuttle and prepared for departure, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. They had gained so much from their encounter with Saira, a deeper understanding of her world, her people, and themselves. But saying goodbye was harder than he had anticipated. The journey back to the EOs was quiet, each member of the crew lost in their own thoughts. The weight of what they had accomplished, and what they were leaving behind, hung heavily in the air. For days, Captain Elias Venn had replayed Saira's final gesture in his mind, her hand over her heart, then extended toward him as if sealing a promise. It wasn't just gratitude, it was trust. And that trust carried with it a responsibility far greater than any mission he'd undertaken before. As the shuttle docked with the starship and the crew prepared for departure, Elias found himself standing at the observation deck, staring out at Aethera 7 one last time. The jungle stretched endlessly below, its vibrant greens and shimmering rivers glowing faintly under the twin moon's light. Somewhere within that vast wilderness, Saira roamed free, her world now safe from the threat of the ancient machines. But as much as he wanted to believe she would be all right, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that their work here wasn't truly finished. "We did everything we could," Dr. Lyra Chen said softly, joining him by the window. Her voice was tinged with both pride and regret. "She saved us, and we saved her planet. That has to count for something." "It does," Elias replied, turning to face her. "But I can't help thinking about what comes next. For her, and for us. We've uncovered secrets that could change how humanity views itself and others. If we don't handle this responsibly, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. Knowledge like this is powerful, but also dangerous. What we do with it will define who we are." Back on board the Eos, the mood among the crew remained subdued. Lieutenant Ren Karras, ever the pragmatist, focused on repairs and recalibrating systems for the journey home. Yet even he seemed affected by their time on HFY 7. He hadn't spoken much since their encounter with Syra, but his actions spoke volumes. He worked tirelessly to ensure the ship was ready, as though determined to prove that their efforts hadn't been wasted. Meanwhile, Chen pored over the data collected during their stay, analyzing every detail about the ruins, the machines, and Syra herself. She spent hours studying the symbols etched into the stones Syra had given them, piecing together fragments of a language that felt both alien and familiar. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, clues to a history richer and more complex than anyone had imagined. Her people weren't just advanced technologically, Chen explained during a briefing. They were philosophers, artists, explorers. Everything they built, the cities, the machines, even the core, it was all designed to coexist with nature. They didn't see technology as separate from life. They saw it as an extension of it. That's why the malfunction was so devastating, Elias added, leaning forward in his chair. When the machines turned against them, they didn't just lose their tools, they lost their way of life. Karras frowned, crossing his arms. "So what are we supposed to take away from this?" "That progress is bad. That we should abandon technology altogether." "No," Elias said firmly, "but we need to learn from their mistakes. Progress without purpose is meaningless. We have to ask ourselves, why do we create? Why do we explore? Is it for power, or is it for connection?" His words lingered in the air, sparking a rare moment of reflection among the crew. For too long, humanity had approached exploration with a mindset of conquest, taking what it wanted without considering the consequences. But Syra had shown them another path, one rooted in understanding and cooperation. As the Eos left HFY 7's orbit and entered the vast expanse of space, Elias called a meeting to discuss their next steps. The data they had gathered was invaluable, but sharing it with Earth's governing bodies came with risks. Governments and corporations might see only profit in the ruins and the knowledge they contained, rather than the lessons they offered. "We can't let this fall into the wrong hands," Elias declared, his tone resolute. "If word gets out about the machines, or worse, if someone tries to replicate them, we could end up repeating the exact same disaster." "What do you suggest?" Karras asked, raising an eyebrow. "Keep it all a secret. Pretend none of this happened." "Not a secret," Elias countered, "but we control the narrative. Instead of focusing on the machines, we highlight the importance of balance, the harmony between technology and nature. We frame this discovery as a lesson in coexistence, not exploitation." Chen nodded in agreement. "And we make sure Syra's story is told. She represents everything we stand to gain if we approach other species with respect and empathy. If humanity sees her courage, maybe they'll realize there's more to gain from cooperation than domination." Over the following weeks, the crew worked together to compile their findings into a report that emphasized the ethical implications of their discovery. They included detailed accounts of Syra's bravery, sketches of the ruins, and translations of the symbols she had shared. Every word was chosen carefully, aiming to inspire rather than provoke fear or greed. But as they neared Earth, tensions began to rise once more. News of their return preceded them, and rumors spread quickly. Speculation ran rampant about what they had found on HFY 7, fueled by leaks from officials eager to claim credit for the mission. Some hailed them as heroes, Others accused them of withholding vital information. By the time the EOs touched down at the orbital station above Earth, the pressure was palpable. Elias stepped off the ship first, flanked by Chen and Karis. Reporters swarmed them, shouting questions and shoving recording devices in their faces. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every move. Yet, amidst the chaos, Elias remained calm, his expression unwavering. "This isn't just our story to tell," he said firmly, addressing the crowd. "It belongs to Scifi 7, and to the being who trusted us enough to share it. Her name is Syra, and her courage saved not only her world but ours. Before you ask about the ruins or the machines, ask yourselves this: what kind of future do you want to build? One driven by fear and greed, or one guided by understanding and unity?" His words silenced the reporters momentarily, their pens hovering midair as they absorbed his message. For the first time, the focus shifted from the potential wealth of the ruins to the moral responsibility humanity bore as explorers. Later that evening, Elias stood alone in his quarters, holding the stone Syra had given him. Its surface glowed faintly, as though alive with memories of their journey. He closed his eyes, imagining her standing beside him, her violet eyes filled with determination and hope. "You showed us what's possible," he whispered, clutching the stone tightly. "Now it's our turn to show the rest of humanity." Though miles apart, the bond they had forged transcended distance. Syra had taught them that true progress came not from conquering the unknown, but from embracing it, with humility, respect, and an open heart. And as long as that lesson endured, the legacy of Scifi 7 would live on, not just in the annals of human history, but in the hearts of those willing to listen. The orbital station above Earth buzzed with activity as delegates, scientists, and reporters gathered to hear the official report from Captain Elias Venn and his crew. The EOs had become a symbol of humanity's greatest achievement, and its most profound challenge. For days, speculation ran rampant about what the team had discovered on Scifi 7. Some hailed them as pioneers who had uncovered untold riches. Others feared they had brought back something dangerous. But none of them were prepared for the story Elias was about to tell. Standing before a crowded auditorium filled with eager faces, Elias took a deep breath. He adjusted the holographic projector in front of him, ensuring it displayed the images he wanted to share, not just of ruins and machines, but of Syra. Her image appeared first, captured during one of their quieter moments together. She stood amidst the glowing bioluminescent flowers, her silver hair catching the light, her violet eyes shimmering with intelligence and determination. "This is Syra," Elias began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "She is not just an alien or a relic of a lost civilization. She is a survivor, a protector, and a teacher. Through her courage, we learned that progress without purpose is meaningless, and that coexistence is possible, even between species as different as ours." As he spoke, the room fell silent. Even the most skeptical faces softened as Elias recounted their journey, the initial mistrust, the battles fought side by side, and the sacrifices made to neutralize the ancient machines. He showed footage of the ruins, translated fragments of the symbols Syra had shared, and explained how her people had once thrived in harmony with technology. But more than anything, he emphasized the lessons she had taught them: humility, empathy, and the importance of protecting both nature and knowledge. When he finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause, not the kind fueled by excitement over potential wealth, but the kind born of genuine admiration and respect. For the first time, humanity saw itself through the eyes of another being, one who had trusted them enough to share her world. After the presentation, Elias retreated to a private balcony overlooking Earth. Below, the planet glowed softly against the blackness of space, its continents outlined by twinkling city lights. It was beautiful, yet fragile, a reminder of everything they stood to lose if they failed to heed the lessons of Scifi 7. "You did good out there," Dr. Lyra Chen said, joining him. Her arms were crossed against the chill of the artificial atmosphere. but her expression was warm. People are listening. That doesn't happen often. I hope so, Elias replied, gazing at the horizon. But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. We've planted a seed, but it's up to everyone else to nurture it. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Do you think they'll honor your request about keeping the location of Sci-Fi 7 classified? They'll have to, Elias said firmly. If word gets out, corporations will descend like vultures. They'll exploit the ruins, disturb the ecosystem, and destroy everything Syra fought to protect. We owe it to her, and to ourselves, to do better. Karis approached them moments later, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by something softer. I never thought I'd say this, he admitted, leaning against the railing. But maybe you're right. Maybe humanity needs a wake-up call. If we keep treating every discovery like a resource to be mined, we'll end up destroying ourselves. Elias smiled faintly, appreciating the rare moment of agreement from Karis. Let's hope it sticks this time. Later that night, Elias sat alone in his quarters, staring at the stone Syra had given him. Its surface still glowed faintly, pulsing rhythmically as though alive with memories of their journey. He turned it over in his hands, tracing the intricate carvings etched into its surface. Each mark told a story, not just of Syra's people, but of the bond they had forged together. For hours, he wrestled with the decision ahead. Returning to Earth meant leaving Syra behind, abandoning the connection they had built. Yet staying would mean turning his back on his responsibilities, to his crew, to humanity, and to the future of interspecies relations. In the end, there was no easy answer. But one thing was certain: saying goodbye didn't mean forgetting. When morning came, Elias addressed the crew one last time. His tone was resolute but tinged with sadness. We've done everything we can here, but our work isn't over. Humanity has been given a second chance, an opportunity to redefine itself. It's up to us to make sure that happens. He paused, meeting each of their gazes. As for me, I'm going back. The announcement stunned the group. Chen was the first to speak. Back? To Sci-Fi 7. Yes, Elias replied, his voice unwavering. Syra trusted us enough to let us into her world. The least I can do is honor that trust. Besides, he added with a small smile, there's still so much to learn. About her people, and about ourselves. Karis frowned, clearly torn. You know it's risky. What if something goes wrong? What if you don't come back? Then at least I'll know I tried. Elias said simply. This isn't just about me. It's about showing humanity that we can coexist with others, not as conquerors, but as equals. Chen placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Be careful, Elias, and promise you'll come back someday. I promise, he replied, gripping the stone tightly. But until then, take care of Earth. Make sure they remember why this matters. Weeks later, Elias found himself standing once again on the surface of Sci-Fi 7, the familiar hum of the jungle surrounding him. The air smelled fresh, the ground steady beneath his feet. As he ventured deeper into the wilderness, he called out softly, hoping she would hear him. Syra, he shouted, his voice carrying through the trees. It's me. I came back. At first, there was only silence. Then, from the shadows, she emerged, her silver hair flowing like liquid light, her violet eyes glowing with surprise and recognition. For a moment, neither of them moved, simply taking in the sight of the other. Finally, Syra stepped forward, reaching out to touch his hand. Her fingers were warm this time, her expression softening into a smile. Without words, she conveyed everything she couldn't say aloud: gratitude, relief, and perhaps even joy.